Welcome back. She surrendered to the cook. Not the general, not the officers, the cook. Because he was making bread during a battle, and she decided that was the only sensible thing happening on that field. He took the sword. He asked if she was hungry. Everything after that followed naturally. The Battle of Ashvale Ridge ended on a Wednesday, which Pell Marsh thought was an undignified day for a battle to end on. Wednesdays were for inventory and bread making, and the particular administrative tedium of a supply camp. They were not for history. History, apparently, had not consulted the calendar. He was at the cook fires when it happened. 300 yards behind the front line, which was where a camp cook was supposed to be, which was the one military regulation Pell had never once violated in 4 years of following armies around and feeding them. He was making the bread for the evening, because bread waited for no battle. And he had learned early that if the bread was ready when the fighting stopped, men ate and calmed down, and if it wasn't, they didn't. And the difference mattered more than anyone in command ever seemed to appreciate. He heard the horns. He knew what they meant. He kept making the bread because the bread still needed making. What he did not expect was the figure that came over the ridge and walked down the slope toward him specifically. She was tall. She was, in fact, the tallest person he had seen in 4 years of following armies, which, given that he had been in the company of soldiers, was not a small statement. Dark green skin, orc dark, the deep color of old leaves, black hair plastered to her jaw by rain and effort, armor that had been impressive before the battle and now told the story of the battle in its condition. One pauldron torn away, a deep dent in the breastplate on the left side, a cut above her eye that had bled down her face and dried there. She was walking with the deliberate pace of someone who had made a decision and was executing it. She walked past 3 soldiers, a lieutenant, and a standard bearer, none of whom moved because she was an orc general, and they had spent the last 6 hours fighting her army and were not sure what was happening. She walked to the cook fire. She looked at Pell. She drew her sword from her back, a large thing, heavy, obviously well-made, obviously old, and held it out to him, hilt first. Pell looked at the sword. He looked at her. He looked at the sword again. "I'm the cook, I know," she said. Her common was precise and accented, the accent of someone who had learned it formally rather than in the field. "The officers are," he pointed, behind him, significantly. "I know where the officers are," she said. The sword did not waver. "I am choosing to surrender to you." Pell looked at her. He thought about this for a moment. He looked at the bread, which was at a stage that required attention. He looked at the sword, which was still being held out to him. "Why?" he said. "Because," she said, "you are the only person on this field who is doing something useful." Pell Marsh was 34 years old and had been a cook since he was 16 and had followed armies for 4 of those years and had never once been in this situation. He thought that this was reasonable, given that this situation was unprecedented. He wiped his hands on his apron. He took the sword. "Right," he said. "Are you hungry?" Her name was Voren Keth. She had been, the commanding general of the Northern Orc Alliance forces, a position she had held for 7 years. She sat on a supply crate with a bowl of stew and the particular expression of someone who had made a decision they intended to stand by, regardless of how strange it became. Pell made her eat before he called anyone. This was partly because the stew was ready and hot, and she was clearly in need of it, and partly because he needed a few minutes to think about what had happened, and cooking did not require thought in the way that other activities did, which meant that thinking happened naturally alongside it. "The officers are going to be," he started. "Confused," she said. "Yes, it's not standard procedure," he said. "Standard procedure," she said, "is for the commanding officer to surrender to the opposing commanding officer. The opposing commanding officer is currently at the northeast end of the ridge managing the logistics of winning. He did not come to me. I came here to surrender to me. Yes, to the cook. You were available," she said, "and present." And she stopped. "And," he said. She looked at the stew. "You were making bread," she said. "There was a battle happening and you were making bread because the men would need to eat after. That is," she appeared to search for the word. "Sensel," she said. in a way that most things on a battlefield are not. Pell considered this. He had always thought of bread making as an obvious thing to do. Apparently, it was not. "I'm going to have to go get General Marin," he said. "He's going to have questions." "I have no doubt," she said. "He's going to want to know why you surrendered to the cook." "I will explain it to him the same way I explained it to you," she said. "He's not going to find it as straightforward as I did." She almost smiled. It was a very small movement, barely there, gone as quickly as it came. "No," she said. "I expect not." He went to get General Marin, who had many questions, who was in fact considerably confused, and who spent 40 minutes trying to determine whether this was some kind of trick before accepting that it was, apparently, exactly what it appeared to be. The enemy general had surrendered to his camp cook because his camp cook was making bread. Pell went back to the cook fires. He made the bread. He fed the men. In the morning, when the negotiations began, someone told him that General Voronketh had requested that the cook be present. He was not sure what to make of this. He went anyway, because someone had to bring the food. The negotiations took 3 weeks. Pell had not expected to be involved in them. He had expected to cook and observe from a distance, and eventually move on to wherever the army went next. This was the normal pattern of 4 years of following armies. Arrive, establish the cook fire, feed the men, move on. What happened instead was that Voronketh kept requesting that he be present, and General Marin kept allowing it because General Marin was pragmatic enough to understand that the enemy general's unexpected cooperation was worth some accommodation. And the accommodation she requested was the presence of the cook. "Why?" Pell asked her, on the 4th day, when a particularly difficult argument about treaty boundaries had paused for the midday meal that he had provided. "Because you don't have an agenda," she said. She was eating with the efficiency he had observed since the first bowl of stew. Focused, unhurried, all of it used. "I have a bread agenda," he said. "A bread agenda does not affect territorial boundaries," she said. "Everyone else in this room wants something. You want the food to be good. I want it to be hot," he said. "There's a difference." She looked at him. It was a direct look, the kind that didn't slide off anything. "You know what I mean?" "I do," he said. "I'm not sure it's a good reason to have me at a peace negotiation." "It is precisely the right reason," she said. "You have no interest in the outcome except that people should be fed and the food should be hot. This makes you the only person in this room I trust to tell me if I'm making a mistake." Pell looked at her. She was. He had established over 4 days exactly what she appeared to be. A general who had made a considered decision and was making further considered decisions. The surrender had not been a trick. The request for his presence was not a trick. She had handed him her sword because she had decided the war should stop, and she had calculated that this was the most efficient way to stop it. And the calculation had included the observation that he was the only person on the field doing something sensible. "I'm not a diplomat," he said. "I know," she said. "That is also why I want you here." He went back to the cook fire and thought about this while he made the afternoon bread and decided that it was, as far as he could tell, the strangest assignment he had ever had, and that he was going to continue with it because the food still needed to be hot. The negotiations concluded at the end of the 3rd week with a treaty that most of the officers on both sides described as better than expected. Pell had no opinion on this. He had provided meals, answered direct questions when asked, and once on the 12th day told a human colonel that his proposed boundary was going to cause water rights problems in 20 years, because he had grown up near the river in question and knew how the water moved, and the colonel had been annoyed but had adjusted the boundary. Voronketh had watched this exchange with an expression he was beginning to recognize as her version of satisfaction. When the treaty was signed, Pell began packing the cook supplies. This was the normal procedure. The army would move or disband or be reassigned. He would go wherever the food was needed next. "Where are you going?" she asked. He looked up. She was standing at the edge of the supply area, out of armor for the first time he had seen. Practical clothes, travel clothes, the clothes of someone who was also packing. "Wherever the commission takes me," he said. "The army will have a new posting. I'll go." You follow armies, she said. Someone has to feed them, he said. You could feed something other than armies, she said. He looked at her. What do you mean? She was quiet for a moment. In the 3 weeks he had spent in the negotiations, he had learned that her silences were not empty. They were the silences of someone choosing words carefully, because words, in her experience, had consequences. The treaty requires an oversight committee, she said. One representative from each side. They will meet quarterly to assess compliance. The meetings will require. She paused. Provisions, he said. Hot food, she said. At meetings that will be long and difficult, and in which the participants will be more reasonable if they are fed properly. He looked at the supply crate he had been packing. He looked at her. You're asking me to cook for the Peace Treaty Committee. I am noting, she said, that the position exists and that you would be suited to it. You're asking me to cook for the Peace Treaty Committee, he said again. Something moved at the corner of her mouth. The pay is better than army cooking, she said. The hours are more reasonable, and the committee will be less prone to poor decisions if the food is hot. That's your argument for this. It is an accurate argument, she said. Pell looked at the half-packed crate. He thought about 4 years of following armies. He thought about Wednesdays and inventory and bread making and a woman who had walked across a battlefield to surrender to a cook because he was doing something sensible. Where do the meetings happen, he said. Alternating locations, she said. The first is in Kethvale. In 3 months. Kethvale, he said. It is a reasonable town, she said. Good market. Decent water for cooking. He looked at her. Have you been researching Kethvale? I researched the meeting location, she said. The water quality is relevant to the food quality. The food quality is relevant to the committee's effectiveness. She held his gaze. I was thorough. Pell finished packing the crate. He picked it up. He set it down again. The committee meetings, he said. How many people? 6 to 8, depending on the agenda. For a full meal or working provisions. She blinked. It was the first time he had seen her blink in the way of someone whose line of thinking had been interrupted. Full meal, she said, after a moment. 6 to 8 for a full meal is manageable, he said. I'd need a kitchen, not a field setup. Kethvale has an inn with a suitable kitchen, she said. I checked. He looked at her. He had spent 3 weeks watching her negotiate a peace treaty, and she had been the most prepared person in every room she entered. She had prepared for the water quality and the kitchen. You expected me to say yes, he said. I expected you to ask practical questions, she said. Which you have. Yes. What if I'd said no? Then I would have found a different cook, she said. But the committee's outcomes would have been worse. She was looking at him steadily. You make people more reasonable. It is a quality I have observed. I make them full, he said. There's a difference. There is, she said. But in my experience, the two are connected. He picked up the crate again. 3 months, he said. Kethvale. Full meal for 6 to 8. Yes, she said. I'll need the dates in writing, he said. And the dietary requirements of the committee members. Allergies, preferences, religious restrictions. She produced a folded document from her coat. I anticipated the question, she said. He took the document. He looked at it. It was thorough. Of course it was thorough. Right, he said. I'll be there. She nodded once. She turned to go. Voran, he said. She turned back. The sword, he said. I still have it. She looked at him for a moment. I know, she said. Keep it. It's a general's sword, he said. It should. I am no longer a general, she said. And you accepted the surrender. The sword is yours. He looked at the sword, which was in the cook's supply wagon, because he had not known what else to do with it, and it was too large to carry comfortably. I can't use it, he said. I'm a cook. Then keep it as a record, she said. That is what it is. He thought about that. A record of what? She looked at the ridge, the battlefield, the supply camp, the treaty tent. She looked at him. That someone was making bread, she said, when it mattered. She walked away. He stood with the document of dietary requirements in one hand and thought about records and bread and a woman who had researched the water quality of a town 3 months in advance. He finished packing. He went where the food was needed. He counted the weeks to Kethvale. The first committee meeting was in the 2nd week of autumn. Pell arrived 4 days early because a full meal for 6 to 8 required preparation, and he had learned in 4 years of feeding armies that preparation was the difference between a meal and an event. He inspected the inn kitchen, which was adequate. He spoke to the innkeeper about what was available locally. He went to the market and assessed the produce with the attention of someone who understood that quality at the source determined quality at the table. He made a menu. Then he revised it based on the dietary document Voron had given him, which listed 6 sets of requirements and was annotated in a second hand that he recognized, after a moment, as hers. Notes in the margins about preferences beyond requirements, things people liked, things they found comfort in. He had not expected the annotations. He looked at them for a long time and then went back to the market to adjust the menu accordingly. She arrived on the morning of the meeting, which was also earlier than required. He was in the kitchen when he heard her voice in the common room. Her tone, even through a wall, identifiable, the particular cadence of her comment. He came out. She was in travel clothes, road-worn, a pack over one shoulder. She looked at the common room, which he had arranged for a working meal rather than a formal one. Round table, no head, everything within reach, the room warm. She looked at the arrangement, then at him. "You got my notes," she said. "Yes," he said. "The margins were useful. I wasn't sure you would read them." "They were on the document," he said. "I read everything on a document." She set her pack down. She looked at the table. "Round," she said. "No head," he said. "Everyone reaches everything themselves. People are less defensive when they're not positioned." She looked at him. "You've thought about this. You asked me to make people more reasonable," he said. "I thought about how food does that." He went back to the kitchen. "The meeting is in 2 hours. Are you hungry?" A pause. "Yes," she said. He made her something. Not the meeting food. Something simple. Travel food turned into something better by having a kitchen and 20 minutes. He brought it to the common room. She ate it the same way she had eaten the stew on the battlefield. With full attention, nothing wasted. "The annotations," he said, sitting across from her. "The ones about preferences. How did you know?" "I asked," she said, "before the meeting was confirmed. I told the committee members I was assessing logistics and asked about their food preferences. People answer logistics questions honestly." She looked at the dish. "Commissioner Heron has a bad knee. Cold makes it worse. Hot food helps him think more clearly because he is less uncomfortable." "So you noted that he prefers warm dishes," Pell said, "and that he dislikes anything acidic because it affects his digestion, which affects his temper," she said, "which affects his willingness to compromise." Pell looked at her. "You're running a food strategy," he said. "I am running a peace treaty," she said. "The food is part of the treaty." He thought about this. "Has anyone else told you that?" "No," she said. "Most people think food is incidental." "Most people are wrong," he said. She almost smiled again. The almost smile that came and went quickly, that he had spent 3 weeks in negotiations observing and had started to think of as the real expression. The one underneath the general's composure. "Yes," she said, "they are." The committee arrived. The meeting happened. Pell served a meal that was hot for Commissioner Heron and avoided acidic components, and included the specific things that 3 of the other members had mentioned in passing to Voron's logistics questions and which she had noted in the margins. The meeting was the most productive first session anyone present had expected. Pell washed the dishes and listened to the committee members leave and heard one of them say to another, "I don't know what it is about these meetings, but I always think more clearly here," he thought. "It's the food." He did not say this because no one had asked. Voron found him in the kitchen. "It went well," she said. "I know," he said. "I listened through the door." "And?" "Commissioner Heron agreed to the Eastern Boundary revision," he said. "He wouldn't have if the meeting had started with cold food." She looked at him. "You tracked the boundary revision to the food." "To his knee," he said. "The knee to the food to his temper, the temper to the revision." He dried a bowl. "It's a long chain, but it's there." "That is an extraordinary level of attention," she said. "That is cooking," he said. She was quiet for a moment. He could feel her looking at him the way she looked at things. Directly, without deflection. The next meeting, she said, in 3 months. The agenda will include the trade route amendments. Commissioner Heron will be more difficult on trade routes than boundaries, Pell said. His family has trade interests. I know, she said. His daughter is getting married in the spring, he said. He mentioned it when he arrived. I noted it. She was still. Something celebratory with the dessert, he said. Appropriate for the season. It doesn't need to be connected. He'll feel it anyway. Voren looked at him for a long time. Pell, she said. Voren, he said. How long have you been doing this? She said. Noticing things. Making them better by noticing them. He thought about it honestly. Since I was 16, he said. I started cooking because it was what was available. I stayed with it because, he paused. Because people are different when they've eaten. When they're not hungry or cold, they're more themselves. He set the bowl on the shelf. The fighting never made them more themselves. The food did. She was quiet. That is why you were making bread, she said, during the battle. They were going to need to eat after, he said. Whatever happened. She looked at the kitchen, the ordered shelves, the clean surfaces, the tools in their places, the kitchen of a person who knew their work. I was going to lose, she said. At Ashvale Ridge. I knew it by the second hour. The question was whether I could preserve enough of my force to negotiate from a position rather than surrender unconditionally. You surrendered unconditionally, he said. I surrendered to the cook, she said, which is different. A general who surrenders to an officer surrenders to the hierarchy. A general who surrenders to the cook, she paused, demonstrates that the war is over. Not the battle, the war. And your army understood that. My army watched their commanding general walk across the field to a cook fire, she said. They understood that I had decided the fighting was finished, not suspended. Finished. She looked at her hands. It was the clearest signal I could send without language. Pell looked at the sword, which was in his pack because he still didn't know what to do with it, and carrying it had become habit. You planned it, he said. I calculated it, she said. There is a difference. Planning implies certainty. I calculated the most likely outcome of the available options and chose accordingly. And you chose the cook. I chose the person making bread, she said. The bread was the signal. He put away the last of the dishes. He turned around. She was still in the doorway of the kitchen, travel-worn and direct and exactly herself. The next meeting, he said. 3 months. Yes, she said. You'll be there early, he said. I will need to assess the logistics, she said. And the water quality, he said. The almost smile. The water quality affects the bread, she said. The bread affects the meeting. Long chain, he said. But it's there, she said. He looked at her. She looked at him. The kitchen was clean, and the committee had gone, and outside Kethvale was doing its evening, and there were 3 months between. Now and the next meeting, and the treaty was real, and the sword was in his pack, and the bread had been hot. I'm going to stay in Kethvale, he said. Between meetings, there's work here. The inn needs a regular cook. The market is good. She was very still. I mention it, he said, because you know the town, the water quality, the market, the kitchen situation. I researched it thoroughly, she said. I know, he said. It shows. He looked at the kitchen. If you're passing through between meetings. The oversight route, she said, goes through Kethvale quarterly to assess border compliance. Quarterly is every 3 months, he said. Yes, she said. The committee meetings are every 3 months, he said. Yes, she said. So you'd be here quarterly, she said. Yes. He looked at her. She looked back with the full attention, the direct look. I could have something hot, he said. When you arrive, if you're passing through. She was quiet for a long moment. The quiet of someone choosing words. The oversight assessments begin early in the morning, she said, before breakfast. I can have something ready before early in the morning, he said. I'm a cook. I'm already up. She looked at the kitchen, at him, at the kitchen again. That would be, she started. Practical, he said. Something happened. The almost smile became more than an almost. Brief, real, complete. The thing itself, which he had seen fragments of for 3 weeks, and was now seeing fully. And it changed the whole of her face in the specific way of expressions that were not often allowed out. Yes, she said, it would. She picked up her pack. She went to the door. Voren, he said. She turned. The sword, he said. I think about it sometimes. Whether I should have taken it. You accepted the surrender, she said. The sword is yours. It feels like it should mean something, he said. Beyond a record. She looked at him for a moment. What would you like it to mean? He thought about it honestly. That someone was paying attention, he said, to what mattered. She looked at the pack where the sword was. At him. Then that is what it means, she said. Keep it. She left. He stood in the clean kitchen and listened to the inn settle into its evening and thought about quarterly assessments and hot food before early mornings and a sword that was a record of paying attention to what mattered. He started planning the menu for the next meeting. Commissioner Heron's daughter was getting married in the spring. Something celebratory, not connected. He would feel it anyway. Pelmarsh began making the notes. 3 months later, she arrived 2 days early. She said she was assessing the logistics. He had breakfast ready. She ate it with the full attention she gave everything. At the kitchen table, not the common room, because the common room was for meetings and the kitchen was for other things. And he had put 2 chairs at the kitchen table and she had sat in one without being asked. The logistical assessment, he said. The border road requires documentation, she said. The documentation requires, she stopped. 2 days, he said. She looked at her plate. The documentation is thorough, she said. He poured tea. He put the cup in front of her. He sat down with his own. Voren, he said. Pell, she said. The documentation said. She looked at him. The full attention, direct. Takes 1 day, she said. He nodded. He drank his tea. I arrived 2 days early, she said. Yes, he said. You did. The second day is, she stopped. Practical, he said. She was quiet. It's practical to arrive early when there are things worth arriving early for. She looked at the kitchen, at the clean surfaces and ordered shelves and tools in their places, and the 2 cups of tea, and the breakfast that had been ready before the morning, because he was already up. Yes, she said, it is. He got up to start the bread for the meeting day. He could hear her behind him, finishing the tea, and the kitchen was warm and the morning was good, and outside Kethvale was waking up to an ordinary day, which was the best kind, the kind that accumulated into a life. The treaty is holding, she said. I know, he said. Commissioner Heron told me at the market yesterday. He bought fish. He came to the market? He arrived early too, he said, apparently. A pause. The committee members, she said, are finding reasons to arrive early, he said. Yes, because the food is hot when they get here, he said. Yes, she was quiet for a moment. You planned this, she said. I calculated it, he said. There is a difference. Planning implies certainty. He looked at her over his shoulder. I calculated the most likely outcome of the available options and chose accordingly. She looked at him. He looked at her. Long chain, she said. But it's there, he said. Outside, Kethvale continued its morning. Inside, the bread was rising, and the tea was hot, and the sword was on the shelf, where he had put it 3 months ago where it would stay, because it was a record and records needed a place to be kept. A record that someone had been making bread when it mattered. A record that a general had walked across a battlefield to say so. A record of every hot meal since, and the quarterly assessments, and the 2 chairs at the kitchen table, and the documentation that took 1 day, and the visits that lasted 2. The record, like the treaty, was holding. That was enough. That was, in fact, considerably more than enough. The second committee meeting was in winter. Pell had adjusted the menu for the season. Heavier, warming, the kind of food that made a cold room feel smaller and a difficult conversation feel more manageable. Commissioner Heron's daughter's wedding had been in the autumn, which meant the spring celebration he had planned was retrospective, which was fine because good food did not require a reason, only an occasion, and the occasion was that people were gathered and needed to be well. Voren arrived 2 days early again. She said the border road had presented new documentation requirements. He did not ask about the documentation. He had the kitchen chair pulled out before she came through the door because he had heard her horse at the inn yard and had calculated the time between the yard and the kitchen and had the tea poured at the correct moment. She sat down. She looked at the tea. She looked at him. You heard me arrive, she said. The kitchen window faces the yard, he said. You were watching for me, she said. I was watching the yard, he said. You arrived. Those are related facts with different implications. She drank the tea. He sat across from her. Outside, the winter was doing its winter things. Cold, dark, the particular silence of a town that had pulled itself indoors. The meeting agenda, she said. The trade route amendments. Commissioner Heron will be difficult, Pell said. His family's interests in the northern route. I know, she said. I have been thinking about how to approach it. What have you concluded? She was quiet for a moment. That the northern route is not worth the conflict it will generate. There is an eastern alternative that serves most of the same interests with fewer points of contention. Have you proposed this to your side? Not yet, she said. I wanted to think it through first. He looked at her. She was looking at the table, which was unusual. Voron Keth, in his experience, looked at what she was talking about or at the person she was talking to. Looking at the table was different. You're not sure, he said. I am sure about the route, she said. I am, she stopped. Less certain about the reception. Your side will resist the eastern route because it concedes the northern one, he said. Yes, she said, even though the eastern route is better. Even though, she said, the concession is visible. The improvement is long-term and therefore abstract. He got up and put bread on the table. Not the meeting bread, the kitchen bread, the kind he made for himself, which was different in a way that would require explanation to describe, but was immediately apparent in the eating. She took a piece. She ate it. What would you do, she said. He sat down. About the route, about the resistance, she said. You make people more reasonable. How do you do it when the thing is abstract? He thought about it honestly. I make the abstract concrete, he said. If someone can't taste the benefit, I give them something they can taste that reminds them of the feeling of benefit. The feeling carries over. She looked at the bread. That is, she stopped. Manipulation, he said. I was going to say elegance, she said. It's cooking, he said. Cooking is the management of expectation through sensation. If you know what someone expects and what sensation will meet that expectation, you can. He paused. Guide them toward what is actually good. That is manipulation, she said. It's hospitality, he said. There's a difference. She looked at him with the full attention. Is there? Manipulation serves the person doing it, he said. Hospitality serves the person receiving it. He looked at the bread. I make the food good because they deserve good food, not because I want something from them. She was quiet for a long time. I want them to agree to the eastern route, she said. Because it's better for them, he said, or because it's easier for you. She looked at the table again. Both, she said. I won't pretend otherwise. Both is honest, he said. Both is fine. The question is which one is primary. The eastern route is genuinely better, she said. For the region, for trade, for the people who use the roads. Then serve that, he said. Make it concrete. Tell me what the eastern route gives them that the northern one doesn't. She told him. He listened. He asked questions. Not diplomatic questions. Practical ones. How long was the route? What did it pass through? What markets did it serve? What was the road condition in winter? She answered them with the precision she gave everything. At the end she said, You're going to put this in the food somehow. Commissioner Heron comes from a town on the Eastern Road, he said. He was born there. He left when the northern route became primary and the eastern town declined. He looked at her. He hasn't been back. She stared at him. I know this, he said, because he told me at the first meeting, while eating, when he was comfortable enough to talk about his childhood. I noted it. He stood up. The Eastern Road passes through his hometown. If the route is restored, the town recovers. He knows this even if he hasn't said it in the meeting room. And the food? She started. His hometown is known for a specific preserved fruit, Pell said. His mother made it. He mentioned this also. He went to the pantry and came back with a small jar. I found it at the market here. Someone imports it from the east. He set it on the table. It's in the dessert. At the meeting. It's not mentioned. It doesn't need to be mentioned. Voron looked at the jar. At him. At the jar again. Pell, she said. Voron, he said. You have been planning this since the first meeting, she said. I have been cooking for it since the first meeting, he said. There is a difference. She picked up the jar. She turned it over in her hands. She set it down. The eastern route will pass, she said. After this meeting, probably, he said. The food helps, but it's not sufficient on its own. You still have to make the argument. I know how to make the argument, she said. I know you do, he said. That's why I told you about the jar. She looked at him steadily. He had been looked at by Voron-Keth in many contexts now: battlefield, negotiation, kitchen table. And the look was always the same in quality, which was complete and direct and fully present. But it was not always the same in content. What was in the look now was something he had not seen there before, or had seen the edges of briefly and not examined. He examined it now. You trust me, he said. Yes, she said. I established that at Ashvale Ridge. With the sword, he said. With the sword, she said. And with everything since. She looked at the kitchen, the ordered shelves, the morning light, the 2 cups. I have been coming here because... She stopped. The documentation, he said. The documentation takes 1 day, she said. I have been coming 2 days early because... She stopped again. He waited. He had learned, over these months, to wait for Voron-Keth to find the word she wanted, because she always found it, and the word she found was always the right one. Because I want to, she said. That is the complete reason. I want to, and so I do. He looked at her. I find, she said, that I am better at this than I expected to be. At what? He said. At wanting something that is not a campaign or a negotiation or an objective, she said. I have been a general for most of my adult life. Wanting things has always been strategic. This, she stopped. This is not strategic. No, he said, it isn't. You are a cook, she said. You are not strategic either. I'm strategic about food, he said. About other things less so. She looked at him. You noticed Commissioner Herron's hometown on the Eastern Road. You found the preserved fruit at the market. You planned the dessert 3 months in advance. She tilted her head slightly. That is strategic. That's cooking, he said. Good cooking requires knowing what people need before they know they need it. Yes, she said. That is also what I said. He looked at her. She looked at him. The kitchen was warm, and outside the winter was very cold. And in 3 months there would be another meeting, and the eastern route would pass, because a general had found the right argument and a cook had found the right preserved fruit. And between those 2 things, the thing that needed doing would get done. The 2 days, he said. Yes, she said. Between the documentation day and the meeting day, he said. Yes, she said. What do you do with them? He said. When you're here. She was quiet for a moment. I sit in the kitchen, she said, and eat things that are hot, and talk to someone who is paying attention. She looked at the table. I have not had a place to do those things in a long time. He thought about 4 years of following armies. The cook fire always ready, the bread always made, the men always fed, the moving, the arriving, the packing and moving again. Neither have I, he said. She looked at him. I've been in Kethvale for 6 months, he said. I've stayed in one place for 6 months. I haven't done that since before the wars. How does it feel? She said. He thought about it honestly, the way he thought about most things. Like the bread, he said. It takes time to be right. You can't rush it. But when it's right, you know. She was still. Is it right? She said. He looked at the kitchen, at the 2 chairs, at the jar of preserved fruit on the table, at Voron-Keth, who had walked across a battlefield to surrender to a cook and had been arriving 2 days early ever since. It's getting there, he said. Ask me at the next meeting. The almost smile, more than almost. I will, she said. The trade route amendment passed at the 3rd committee meeting. Commissioner Herron voted for it. He did not mention his hometown or his mother or the preserved fruit in the dessert. He spoke about regional economic efficiency and long-term infrastructure and the practical benefits of road maintenance on the eastern route. Pell washed the dishes and heard him through the kitchen door and thought, there it is. Voron came to the kitchen when the committee had gone. It passed, she said. I heard, he said. Herron was the deciding vote, she said. I know, he said. Was it the argument or the dessert? The argument was correct on its own terms, she said. The dessert, she paused. I think the dessert reminded him why the argument mattered. That's what dessert is for, he said. She leaned against the kitchen door frame and looked at him. He was washing the last of the meeting dishes, and the kitchen was the particular warm quiet of a room after work well done. The oversight route, she said. The quarterly assessment. Yes, he said. The spring assessment is in 6 weeks, she said. I will need to document the Eastern Road for the first time. It will require. She stopped. More than one day, he said. Considerably more than one day, she said. The Eastern route is longer. The documentation will be thorough. He dried a dish. He put it on the shelf. He turned around. How long, he said. A week, she said. Perhaps 2. He looked at her steadily. She looked back. I'll need to plan menus, he said, for a week. Perhaps 2. The market here is adequate for that, she said. I know, he said. I've been using it for 6 months. She looked at the kitchen, at the 2 chairs at the table, at the sword on the shelf, which had been there since autumn, which he had stopped thinking about moving because it had found its place. Pell, she said. Voran, he said. The documentation, she said, for the Eastern route. It will require someone who knows the roads. You know the roads, he said. I know the military roads, she said. The trade roads are different. Someone who has been following supply routes for 4 years would know them better. He looked at her. Are you asking me to come with you? He said. I am noting, she said, that a cook who has followed armies along the border roads for 4 years would have useful knowledge about road conditions, water sources, and provisions. And the documentation, he said, would benefit from this knowledge. Considerably, she said. And I would need to bring a portable kitchen setup, he said. The oversight budget allows for provisions, she said. And we would be on the road for a week, he said. Perhaps 2. The documentation is thorough, she said. He looked at the kitchen, at the ordered shelves, and the clean surfaces, and the 2 chairs, and the sword on the shelf, and the jar of preserved fruit he had kept, because he had bought more than he needed. He thought about 4 years of following armies. The moving, the arriving, the packing. The cook fire always ready wherever he stopped. He thought about 6 months in one place, which was the longest he had stayed anywhere, and how it had felt like the bread, taking time to be right, and now right. He thought about the Eastern Road, which passed through towns that had been declining since the northern route was primary, which would now recover because a general had made an argument and a cook had found the right preserved fruit, and about all the people in those towns who would need feeding and who would be better and more themselves when they had eaten. When do we leave, he said. She straightened from the doorframe, something in her face. The full expression this time, not the almost of it, not the fragment, the whole thing. The smile that changed everything, that was not often allowed out, that was, he understood now, the one she kept for things that mattered. The spring assessment begins on the 1st of the month, she said. We should leave 3 days before. 3 days before, he said. For logistics. For logistics, she said. Yes. He started making notes for the travel provisions. She sat down at the kitchen table in the chair that was hers, and he could hear the scratch of her pen on paper as she worked on the documentation. And outside Kethvale was doing its winter evening, and the bread was rising for tomorrow, and the sword was on the shelf, and the record continued. A record that someone had been paying attention to what mattered, that the bread had been hot, that the treaty was holding, that 2 people had found their way to the same kitchen table by completely different roads and had decided, both of them, that the roads had been worth walking. Pellmarsh made the notes and started the bread and let the evening be what it was, ordinary and warm and exactly right.